In this video, we're going to talk about digital wellness. It's hard to take a break from our digital lives and it's impacting our employees, but how that's all coming up right now. Hi there, I'm Andrea Adams and the host of the HR Hub. It's a rebranding of HR Shop Talk, but we're still going to talk about the same things with smart, experienced professionals who are doing the work. I encourage you to subscribe to the show or podcast to keep learning from my guests. Today, I have two guests. The first is Daniel C., and I'll just cut to the chase. Daniel is an author. He wrote Spacemaker, How to Unplug, Unwind, and Think Clearly in the Digital Age. This book has won awards. It's clearly touching nerve with a lot of people, including me. And my second guest is Elissa Lok. Elissa is an HR consultant who helped Daniel co-create a course on Spacemaker. And together they're going to help me explore digital wellness. Hi, Daniel. Hi, Elissa. How are you?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Andrea.
Okay, so Daniel, we're going to start with you as the author, I guess. So can you tell me why you wrote the book and about making space in the digital age?
Yeah, so look, I used to be a physiotherapist and I was managing a bunch of different services and, I had kids. I was in part building a house. I'm in Australia, by the way. That's why my accent sounds a little bit different than yours. But I found myself out of space. I found myself wired and frazzled and not sleeping well. And if I'm honest, I was close to burnout. And I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't understand what it felt like to be anxious and have the feelings that I was experiencing. And eventually I started to have breathing issues and I realized that I was breathless when I stood up in front of my team. And then I found myself breathless in strange situations, like when I was at the bus stop or then eventually at the table or reading books with my young kids. And so I ended up getting some medical tests and nothing was wrong, thank goodness, with my heart or my lungs. But when the doctor heard about my lifestyle and the lack of space I had in my life and the amount I worked and the pressures as at the time, a 30-something-year-old person, he just said, I think this is anxiety and you need a rest. So that was a wake-up call for me, particularly because another one of my close friends had burnt out just a few years before and was breathless and ended up being off work for years, actually, because of it and never quite recovering the same way. So I started to take it seriously and I started to realize, I don't have much space in my life for rest or for deep thought or even for fun or for relationships, and I started to realize that our lifestyle can so easily consume so much of our life. And I also realized that a lot of my own habits and behaviors weren't very helpful either around technology, which is where the book led to, realizing that, I might just need 5 hours more of exercise a week to change my life, but I'm doing 15 hours of Netflix every week. So it's not that I don't have time. It's just that I'm filling it with a lot of meaningless stuff that actually is impacting my ability to think deeply and rest fully and reconnect with people in my life. So I went on a journey to understand tech, productivity, digital overuse, and how to make space in this age of digital distraction.
Okay, I'm already going off track, but this is hardly news to my listeners out there. So did you go from being a physiotherapist then into the productivity and then to Spacemakers? Was that the order of things?
I've had a very strange journey when it comes to career. I like Daniel Pink. He wrote this great manga comic, I think The Life of Johnny Bunko many years ago. And he said from a career development perspective, most successful people don't go from A to B to C to D. They go from like A to apple to C to banana cake, and that's been my career. So as a physiotherapist, I became frustrated, passionate, interested in how we work because I realized that as a manager, I was now spending a third of my life on this weird thing called Outlook. reading and responding to emails, and no one had trained me how to do my job. Whereas I had heaps of anatomy and physiology and kinesiology
Right.
and all the stuff I needed to be a clinical physio, but no one had taught me to manage and lead myself, my teams, and to build culture.
Yeah.
And so I became a bit obsessed about how do you actually lead yourself and lead others. And that led me to training people around me. Eventually, I ran a course called Email Ninja, how to get your inbox to zero each day. And it just took off. And I realized I had a business kind of side hustle thing on the side. And that was part of the journey of leading to productivity. But I did a number of other jobs, project management. I've done some Christian ministry work. I've done some writing all around the side. So that's a short answer to a short question.
There's just so much here to talk about in a personal sense, but this is a YouTube channel for HR people. So let's shift gears a little bit there and talk about how remote work and hybrid work is changing employee well-being.
Yeah, it really has. It was a fascinating thing because I actually started to research digital overuse before really many people were talking about it. And it started because I realized that I had a relationship with the online world myself. There was one moment I was in bed with my wife. This is a PG talk, so I'll be nice. I was in bed with my wife, and there I was reading the news on my phone, and she was playing, I don't know, Candy Crush or Merge Dragons. And I realized that we were making love to Siri rather than to each other. We'd lost pillow talk. And actually, we had more of a relationship at that stage with the online world than we did with each other, with 3 kids and not much time. And so for me, I will answer your question about hybrid teams, but what I realized is we have a relationship with the online world. And that relationship, like any relationship, has highs and lows and needs to be assessed in different ways. Now that we had COVID, everything to do with digital overuse accelerated, and we experienced the future that we're all going to live because of how much tech we're using. So we started with Zoom fatigue, where we realized, we get sore eyes and we feel mentally tired when we're online too much. We started to realize that digital overuse on the brain can actually impact our physical health and well-being. But much broader than that, I think we need to get to the stage where we realize we actually have a relationship with the online world. And hybrid and remote working is amazing and offers so many benefits, but only if we are aware of, being trained in, and assessing that relationship with the online world. Because if you don't, it can easily become a 7-to-7 job instead of a 9-to-5 job. And you can even realize that actually I'm working online, but then I'm resting online. So I'm spending my 7, 8, 10 hours online working. And then the way I rest is by scrolling TikTok and watching Netflix and using exactly the same neurological processes in my brain that I do for work. So I never rest mentally. So we need to assess that relationship. And if we do that, to make space from tech for relationships that are face-to-face, for deep thought, for deep rest, well, then hybrid works. It's about the texture that we experience in and around our technologies. Does that make sense?
In a sense, almost too much sense. It's like, oh my God, I have so much to dial back on. Okay, Elissa, this question is for you, and I really want to bring in that HR piece. So what's your perspective on this as a co-facilitator of the course? Why should employers and HR care about wellness in a digital sense?
Thanks, Andrea. So I guess just to back up to how I got connected with Daniel, I read the book. Here it is right here. It was actually given to me as a gift. And I found it very impactful from a personal standpoint, but also from a professional standpoint. As a consultant, I'm working with businesses every day and seeing, how their employees are reacting to this new digital workplace and how it's impacting the business's bottom line. So I really do think employers, employees, and HR should care about it because it's not only impacting employee wellness, it's impacting how productive we are in our actual work. work. The way we work and live has changed significantly, but the way we're managing work in the workplace has not really caught up with that. We're seeing laws being passed, like in Ontario, the right to disconnect. So there's obviously some level of understanding that we're now working far more than ever. It's not beneficial and healthy. What I found very unique from an HR perspective about making space, you can see there's a million wellness trainings out there. There's a million, podcast articles you can read, but none of them that I have encountered really address that bottom line that we are spending so much time digitally and how that needs to be fixed before we can fix all these other issues. You can tell your employees to eat better, to rest more, but unless you actually put practices in place and policies sometimes in place to ensure that they have that rest, you're not only going to have potentially burnt out employees, people spending time on things that aren't actually driving business results. So it certainly is the right thing to do from a, caring for your team and colleagues perspective, but also from a business perspective. There's lots of things I'm seeing out there that are directly tied to people's ability to manage in this new environment. And I'll get more into that a bit later, but yeah, really, it's impacting the bottom line, especially in this competitive labor market, and it's affecting people's personal lives.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the connection between digital work, employee well-being, and productivity. I think a lot of people, their knee-jerk reaction is, well, the more you work, the better. Woohoo. And now you can work at home from 7 to 7. There's also quite a lot of awareness that that's not an accurate perception, but can you talk to me about that? Like, what does the research say?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I started off, my first question was, what is the relationship between digital technology and productivity? So before we even get to the wellness piece, just what does it mean to be productive? Because that's my background as a productivity consultant. And so because what I realized is a lot of the executives and leaders I coach who use technology the most, who have all the right apps and the watches and even know how to integrate them so that they know technology, but they're just not good leaders. They're not nice people, actually, a lot of the time, because they're just wired and they're distracted. And even when you're talking to them, you realize that they're waiting for the next notification and they're half thinking about this and half thinking about that. You even have that sense where the way they talk sometimes is sped up because they're wired with cortisol and that sense of always needing to be doing the next thing. So there's clearly not a correlation where more technology makes you endlessly productive. It's not a linear relationship. It's not even a graph where it goes up using where if you mapped productivity against technology, where you start to get more productive and therefore you plateau, because that only assumes positive aspects of technology. It's actually an upside down U curve. Which means that you definitely need technology to be productive in every field, and we clearly know that. And so we need to be really, really fantastic at using all the different software and hardware and applications that we have and integrating them well and having systems that work as teams and individual skills. But then you plateau, and I call that the productive middle, where more technology isn't making you more productive, but you're reaching this somewhat optimal level. But then what happens, and this is what's happened post-COVID, we've all slidden down the right-hand side of the curve, where we've moved into what I call digital overuse, where actually our productivity and our health and our happiness is actually reducing because we're using technology too much. So that is when we reach for our phone first thing in the morning and last thing at night, where we can't be at the bus stop or the train station or at the supermarket or even with our kids, in the kitchen and not feel like we need to gravitate towards our device to check something just because our brain is wired to need constant stimulation. It's where we lose the ability to focus and manage our attention, where we reduce the amount of interpersonal relationships we have with real people in real time, in real places, and that impacts our happiness and our ability to create healthy teams, or where simply we just don't have the ability to be silent and reflect on our inner life, who we are, where we're heading, where we would like to be, which is all essential for strategic thinking and developing teams. And so digital overuse is a killer, and we need to then unplug and unwind. So disconnect from technology in a habitual way to create spaces where we are experiencing the best of life outside the online world, so that the left-hand side of the curve where we're using tech works really well. So I call them the habits of making pace. You need, on the left-hand side, lots of great skills to use tech well, but we now need to train our teams. And this is a really new thing. We need to train people, and we need to be trained ourselves in the skills of unplugging. The idea that if we don't deliberately and intentionally create patterns of disconnecting for a greater yes, then we may always be online. And that's a very new thing.
I guess, Elissa, maybe this is a question for you. How can we spot a lack of digital wellness, and particularly in an online environment when we're not seeing our employees all the time, and we certainly don't see them in person?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. A lot of employers might not actually have awareness that this is occurring, but they're going to see symptoms of it. So symptoms are going to be, everyone has heard of the staffing issues. You're going to see resignations. You're going to have staff on stress leave. Some of the clients I've worked with have a large proportion of staff on stress leave, high absenteeism. You're going to see disengagement, like maybe on the Zoom meetings, most of the people don't have their cameras on. People aren't participating. They're just over it, and it's obvious by their level of engagement. Employees obviously expressing feelings of stress. You're going to see people working all the time. There's going to be emails coming through at 10 o'clock at night when people are on holidays. It's confusing. Yes. Are they on holidays? Are they here? It's the weekend. Why am I still getting emails? I'm getting notifications. Yet there's not an increase in productivity in their organization that they can say that's actually benefiting them. In fact, it's not benefiting them. These are some of the symptoms. People are working all the time, but they're not engaged. They're not happy. And to Daniel's point, the leaders, you'll see that there's not actual relationship and communication in leading their teams. They might be communicating with them all the time over, messages, Slack or Teams or email, but those connection pieces that can actually foster that discussion. How do I manage the workload? What do I do when I'm on vacation and I want to, not be responding to emails, aren't actually happening. So those leadership relationships are suffering as well. And ultimately the organization is not thriving. It's more the symptoms that they're going to see and think, oh, everyone's resigning. Maybe we're not paying them enough. It's always easy to point to these sort of obvious reasons why people might resign. But, what I've seen is there's a high level of burnout going on. A lot of it has to do with the way that we're working. And unless those issues are addressed, you're probably the next person in the role, it's only a matter of time before they're maybe in the same situation, unless there's some proactive steps, both on the employee end and then on the organizational end as well.
It's the inability to disconnect. And that is so hard, actually. Okay, so...
May I say something on that point, actually,
sure.
Andrea? Because I think, I love what you've said, Elissa, the idea that, employees have such an ability to help create a culture where we are reflecting on our digital well-being, and it impacts the bottom line and improves retention, et cetera, et cetera. But I think I just want to say we need to be kind on ourselves as individuals, so as employees, but also kind on ourselves as employers, because all of digital technology and digital overuse comes in a cultural context, a bigger cultural context. And so for individuals, we are within the context where we're using our devices that are deliberately designed with billions of dollars of research to make us highly addicted. And so we've got to be kind on ourselves that we're using highly addictive technologies that we need for work and we need for life and that are incredibly valuable, but they're addictive and they're designed to do exactly what we're struggling with. At the same time, our workforces are using technologies which, again, are deliberately designed to do the same thing. And we're in a broader culture which is completely obsessed with technology. So all I want to say within that context is we definitely can take the next steps, but be kind on ourselves as we do so, no matter what level you're creating change.
Just to make this point super clearly, if we promote digital wellness and we promote disconnecting as employers, is the productivity of our workforce going to fall?
Will it fall? No.
No. Are you sure? Are you sure?
Absolutely not. No.
Okay.
Look, we are definitely in a stage of life where the problem is that the majority of us are overusing our tools, and the majority of cultures are over soaking themselves in tech. And so definitely from a research perspective, if you unplug more regularly in sensible ways, obviously, with a rhythm and a pattern that is designed to invest in other things that are important, well then, yeah, you'll slide back from that right-hand side of the curve. That's the making space habits back to the productive middle. So the big wins, I think, are both actually. We still need to invest in better skills and education to teach people to use technology well. I mean, I'm still astounded at how many people haven't been trained in managing high volume email, which both Elissa and I teach with Email Ninja. So if you don't know how to use the tools you use, well, you're not going to be productive. But on the right-hand side, we need to be teaching people to unplug at lunch, unplug so they can have a conversation with people face-to-face, unplug so they can plan their work, unplug so they can actually walk around the block and get fresh air and think about the problems that they're trying to solve without the next notification. If you can do that, your productivity will absolutely go up individually and collectively. But the last thing I would like to say is I don't believe, though, that we should have to justify unplugging from a productivity perspective. And while the research does show that it works, there's value in being a human just because it's valuable being a human. You know, it's valuable to walk on the beach and to have a coffee with a friend and to be in bed and have pillow talk with your spouse, you know, and to hang out and play board games with your kids without having to worry about the next email. Like, there's value in being human outside of whether or not it makes you more productive. And so what making space is about is actually not about being more productive, even though it's a nice byproduct. It's actually about living a life that is rich and full and worthwhile in and around our screens.
I'm going to end it with you, Elissa, here. So what can employers do?
So there's a lot of things employers can do, small things. It doesn't have to be, you know, enormous projects or an overwhelming change of everything they do. You know, it can be as simple as making sure there's clear practices around time off work and vacation. So making sure people have the time to be away from work, and when they are, they're not being disturbed. There's planning in place so that people can actually take those breaks so they can come back refreshed. So there's that in their day-to-day work. They can have a planful disconnection times like lunches, phone-free meetings. They can also enable employees to go for a 15-minute walk if they need to, you know, take a break, refresh their thoughts so they can come back and, as Daniel said, solve that problem. They can train their staff. There are trainings, as we know, we offer some of them. They can train their staff on how to manage their email and messaging and structure their time. There's time blocking. I've heard of organizations that do organizational-wide time blocking. So, you know, they say, okay, we check our emails at 2 and at 1 o'clock or at 11, 1, you know, 4, and then we work on our tasks. But there's even individual time blocking to say, hey, here's a strategy that you can use. So educating your staff, giving them the space and ability to actually disconnect for holidays, for different periods of time during the day, and just supporting that type of work environment.
Great. Anything to add, Daniel?
I mean, I love what you said originally, that, you know, we all know this stuff. We kind of do intuitively. We know this stuff, but it's really hard. It's actually really hard to do. It's really hard to turn off your phone. It's really hard to turn off your phone, even just to have half an hour just to sit with your thoughts, even though it's not technically hard to do. What Elissa and I have really wrestled with as we wrote this Making Space course was, how do we not just give information about, you know, all these great ideas, but how do we give people the space to reflect on, what does personal wellness mean for me? So how do I define well-being individually? How might these ideas that we, you know, outlined very specifically, a whole lot of annual, weekly, daily habits to unplug, how might we then reflect on them individually and collectively as teams and organizations? And then how do we actually make commitments, just to 1 to 2 next steps? You know, it's a win for us if someone walks away with, okay, I'm going to turn off my phone and charge it out of the bedroom so that I have a bit of space and have a digital free meal. Or it's a win for me. Yesterday I ran this course and someone said, I'm gonna sell my smartwatch and buy a normal watch so I can walk again and actually just not be distracted, And I said, why don't you turn off the notifications? And he just said, I just can't do it. So it's those tiny decisions that actually add up, and you make one small decision to give you a bit of space, and it leads to a tremendous change individually and then obviously collectively. So we've tried to focus a lot on the habit change focus part of it rather than just more information, which makes you feel bad. And I think all of us can just do one small thing. That's what I would encourage people to do. One small habit to do less tech, to do more life, and to make a bit of space, to live the life you want to live.
Awesome. All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks, Elissa and Daniel. That was a privilege for me. I see in my practice and personal life just how necessary this is. And it's also very hard for me to turn off. So I'm going to have to practice some of what I've been encouraged to today. I did another episode on wellness. It's a very different take from today, but interesting nonetheless. The link is right here. Thanks for watching out there, and we'll see you next time.